The Saab-105G was one of the first aircraft I ever reviewed in War Thunder. Let's take a fresh look in my modern format. What would become the Saab-105 was developed as a private venture by the Saab company back during the early 1960s. The original goal was to create a cheap and light aircraft that could be used for both military and civilian roles, including reconnaissance, trainer duties, and ground attack. The hope was that money from military sales would help fund development of the plane into a small business jet or even an emergency medical transport. Well, the civilian roles never actually happened, but the plane was accepted by the Swedish military, and an order for 100 Saab-105 trainers was placed in 1961. The new jet first flew in '63 and quickly proved itself quite capable, being both easy to fly and fully aerobatic, two really good qualities for a trainer to have. The jet got the designation SK-60 in military service, which began in 1967, but was often informally referred to still as the 105, since Saab still used the 105 designation for the general airframe project. The jet was upgraded over the years and produced in a few different versions, including some one-off prototypes that were used to test new equipment or demonstrate new combat roles. The 105XT was one of those prototype technology demonstrators intended to help market the plane for export sales, with upgraded engines along with hardpoints for weapons and a control system for basic ground attack missions. Eventually, the 105 was purchased by Austria, which operated the 105O, based on the XT, but they were the only export customer. The 105G, also based on the XT demonstrator, added newer engines, a completely reworked combat computer, another set of hardpoints, and compatibility with a wider range of weapons, including air-to-air missiles. The 105G model never went past the prototype stage, and only one was built, but the basic SK-60 trainers continue to fly with Sweden to this day, although they're currently being phased out of service. What we get in War Thunder is the Saab-105G, a strike aircraft in rank 5 of the Swedish air tree with a battle rating of 8.3. Although I'm focusing this review on the 105G in the tech tree, almost everything here also applies to the premium 105OE, as the two jets are almost identical, except for the weapon loadouts and the lack of a ballistics computer on the premium version. The plane has no built-in weapons or radar system, but it does get a basic CCIP for all of its external stores. For loadouts, you can choose between a fairly useful selection of unguided rockets, dumb bombs, gun pods, and air-to-air missiles. This jet now has custom loadouts enabled, which was a huge buff to the plane when it happened a couple of patches ago. The gun pods you can take are the 30mm Aiken M55 cannons. These gun pods are absolutely enormous and very heavy, but they only carry 150 rounds per gun, which is kinda low for such a huge gun pod. There are two dedicated ammo belts available, and this is a case where the choice is really easy. Take the anti-air belt for fighting aircraft, and the ground targets belt for ground targets. No other caveats to think about, but keep in mind that you don't get any tracers, regardless of which one you take. The air-to-air missile you get is the RB-24. This is comparable to the AIM-9B, and is a caged seeker rear aspect IR missile with entry-level performance. It only has 10 Gs of pull, it's not very fast, and it has somewhat poor tracking. But the good news is, at this jet's BR, it's low enough that you're rarely going to be going up against anyone with flares or anything, so if you're careful with your shots, it'll still get good kills for you. The flight performance of the Saab-105 is somewhat simplistic. Remember, this thing was originally intended as a trainer and a light attack jet. Its acceleration isn't very good, it doesn't climb especially well, and to make the situation worse, the engine overheats on 100% throttle at most altitudes. In regular cruise flight, you want to try and keep your throttle between about 96 and 98% in order to avoid overheating your engines. The jet doesn't have combat flaps, and it rips its wings at about 1,000 kilometers an hour, which both impact some of its performance potential. Some good news, though, is that the air brakes are really effective, and they can help control your speed in an attack dive pretty reliably. But overall, this isn't a fast jet, and it's entirely subsonic. In terms of maneuverability and dogfighting agility, well, the lack of engine power kinda holds you back. This jet has a low thrust-to-weight ratio, and vertical maneuvers are going to drain your energy very quickly without really being able to get it back. And even efficiency maneuvers like a high yo-yo are pretty often going to bleed off more speed than you want. Adding to this difficulty, the plane just doesn't pull very hard on the z-axis, so while you can get a reasonable rate of turn out of a coordinated horizontal turn at medium speeds, the snap pull just isn't there in dogfight situations. Dogfighters in this BR range, like the MiG-19 or the F-86, are just going to dance all over the Saab-105, so you gotta be careful and try to use positioning tactics over air combat maneuvering. The jet does have a couple of noteworthy high points, though. It's incredibly stable, which makes aiming air-to-ground weapons with the CCIP comparatively easy, and it's got a good roll rate, which always helps a bit in combat. Taking the Saab-105G out into air battles gives you some fun opportunities. As of the end of 2023, you still get an air spawn in this jet, which makes it a little easier to get to ground targets, or you can try to position for air combat, or both. You won't be able to take out a base in one pass anymore, but my preferred tactic with this jet is to fly in and drop my bombs on a base, then keep going, and try to swing in behind the enemy team unnoticed to take a couple of shots with the RB-24 missiles. It doesn't always work on all maps, it's very terrain dependent, but when you can pull this off, it's an excellent play. You can take the gun pods with the 2 missiles and try for air superiority, but just remember that this isn't the best dogfighter, and you have to use positioning rather than up-close maneuvering in order to get hits and kills. It can be pretty slow-paced, and aiming the guns without the tracers is really difficult beyond point-blank range. But with practice, it can work, even though it does end up being a bit more difficult than a dedicated fighter would be. If you need or want to focus on AI ground units, you've got tons of ordnance options that are perfectly suited for that. And this is a great jet if you're working on a battle pass mission, or even like some event objective that involves blowing up pillboxes and artillery on the ground. In terms of close air support, the Saab-105G is an excellent choice. The CCIP lets you place its weapons with a reasonable degree of accuracy, and all of its rockets and bombs are totally viable to engage ground targets with in this BR range. If you go for rockets, just remember that your quantity is low, so you might have to be really picky with your shots. You'll basically need to get direct hits to get kills, and even then, some tanks at this BR range have good enough armor to survive a couple of hits if the rocket doesn't hit a weak point. Still, this jet is excellent for the close air support role, and with careful flying, you can probably get at least 1 kill with this thing every time you fly it out over a ground battle. Visually, not only is the Saab-105 a great-looking little jet, but its default paint job has basically no insignia on it. If you're like me and you enjoy decorating your jet with unusual rondelles and stuff, this is a great pick, as you won't have to cover anything up. Plus, you get a cool airshow skin, so that's always fun. Landing this jet isn't difficult. It's very stable on final, and it sets down pretty easy, with a very low profile thanks to its short landing gear. But just remember, you don't get a drag chute, and the brakes aren't very strong, so you want to try and set down slow and short if possible. You can drop gear and flaps safely at around 350 kilometers an hour. The cockpit, well, it's a side-by-side 2-seater, so half of your view is completely obstructed. The instruments are clear and easy to find, but the overall visibility is pretty bad. I can't recommend this jet for combat in VR. To close out on the Saab-105G. This jet gets a ballistics computer for its air-to-ground weapons. It can take a good selection of external loadouts, and it doesn't take many spawn points to get into for close air support. However, it's a little underpowered, and it's not a great dogfighter. The final verdict on the Saab-105G is that this jet is essential for Swedish mains. I used this jet to grind out a huge chunk of the tech tree. It's easy to fly, fun to play, and with only a little practice, it can be reasonably effective in combat. As always, thanks for watching.